Hi, Kyle. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, Kyle. Okay, as everybody knows, we start with the same question, and I need to know, who are you, what do you do, and how do we know each other?
All right. So I'm Kyle Fitzmaurice. I am a harm reduction coordinator for an unnamed behavioral health network. And we met through Northwestern.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I think we were in pottery together.
Yes, we were,
Pottery was
which
good.
oddly enough
Yeah.
is an elective for me that I didn't even need. I was like, I just want to know about pottery.
Oh, same.
Yeah. Okay. Hey,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
Good
we
stuff.
got it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I wanted like the ghost moment, and
Yeah.
I didn't get that part, but I made some cool bowls. So.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
It was pretty fun.
We should go back. We'd be like,
Yeah.
Could you accept us, please? Yeah.
I think about just doing it. Like
Yeah,
if you
you
walked
could.
in.
Hey, you know, you got the space.
Yeah. If you just walked in, like, would they question?
I would do it. Yeah. I'll get
Just
okay.
say
Something
it.
about me too. A little story about me before we begin. So you know how like you can like knead the clay and like go in there in the free hours and stuff. Well, people would leave clay behind, and I was like, I will not be wasteful. So I would just like check back a day later to make sure no one wanted the clay, and then I would put it in my own supply.
That's very
and
smart.
I used almost every piece of clay that I had.
Oh, wow.
No, all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I made a little dish. I'll put a picture of it up here.
Yeah.
It's very nice.
Yeah.
It's a brownie
All right.
dish. Anyways.
That's so fun.
Okay, so Kyle, back to you,
Sorry.
okay? No, don't be sorry. I'm the one who talks. But anyways, before talking about like present day Kyle and what you do now, could you take us back to your initial studies at NCCC, Northwestern Connecticut Community College, and what were you in school for, and like what changed in that time?
Yeah, I wanted to be a police officer. So I figured if I went for criminal justice, I would like learn a little bit more about the job and then look better on a resume. So I did that, and I was doing like security, like loss prevention, so like secret shoppers full time, and going to Northwestern full time.
I actually knew someone who did that also at Northwestern,
Oh, no
and
way.
yeah, and it's kind of like intense when someone you're
pretty-
physically watching someone steal. And
Yeah.
you have to bring it up.
Yeah, it's pretty intense for sure. It's a lot of like adrenaline before you like just confrontation.
Yeah.
And that probably should have been my first sign that the job wasn't for me. Was like I don't love confrontations, and so. But I think like fast forward a little bit, and I just realized that like policing just wasn't for me. It's in my family. I think it's a wonderful job, but my heart was really in a different direction. So I sort of had this like I guess quarter life crisis because I'm kind of young, and I was like,
I think that's becoming more of a like a thing.
This generation for sure.
Right.
So I kind of was like, what do I want to be when I grow up? I didn't know. And this weird string of things happened where I met this guy who was chief of probation. Awesome dude. He was going to help me get into probation. I met him at a pool party.
Where they all meet.
Where we all meet all of our probation officers.
Right.
And I remember like chatting with him. I was very excited. He gave me some advice, so I was gonna like go do those things. And then I saw this job on Indeed that was for overdose response. And I was like, I don't know anything about people who use drugs, but like sounds cool. It was working with the cops, so it was like cop adjacent. Like I love cops. So I thought it'd be a cool like middle ground for me to work in. Definitely helping people. So I applied for it, and I brought my resume down the street to like where they were hiring. So can you bring this to the hiring manager? And they brought it to the pool guy. He had back to the pool guy. So he had just left his role as a chief probation officer.
So you didn't know that he had done this?
No, I had no idea.
That's so cool.
Yeah, so they bring it up to him, and he was like, "Oh my god, I know him." So he called me, and we talked about like how he got to where he was, and like what I wanted to do. Really brief interview, and then I think they brought me in. I was able to get the job somehow.
Okay, that is sick. That is so cool.
Yeah, weird like string of events that happened, and somehow now I'm here.
Isn't that life? You know, you never know who you're talking to at a pool party.
Yeah,
you really
just
don't.
never know. Yeah, and that dude is still like a great friend of mine. He's moved on since then, but like an awesome person. So
yeah,
it's cool
you keep
to,
in contact and stuff.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started in social work and have since transitioned more to like a public health role. So what approaches are different from social work when it comes to language that is used on the daily between colleagues and practices that are taken?
I feel like a lot of the language is similar. Like the work that I'm doing in public health is now I've moved into like more of like a programmatic space, like admin-y space. Actual work of harm reduction is very boots on the ground. So you're working with individuals. So I think there is this kind of middle ground. The team we have is supported by clinicians, like social work. And that's what I wanted for a long time. And I think I kind of found my own path in a different direction. But harm reduction is more public health than it is clinical work. It's more based in like peer roles, so person to person, than it is kind of like looking for like any level of change. Social work, therapy, all of those things, we're helping people through their stages of change. And harm reduction, while we can do that, is more about quality of life where people are at than it is about like individual change. So I think that I vibed with that more.
Yeah.
The language is very similar. It intersects so much because the work is it's still with people. But I think the biggest part of it that's different is that like we're looking more at like the structure of like societal norms. We're looking at like policies, and we're having conversations about like what needs to change in like that realm. And in doing so, like the boots on the ground part is more like with people who are experiencing all of these wrongdoings that have kind of been just like shamed and looked down upon and not offered connection and service for so long. So a lot of that is the same.
Yeah.
I think in this work too, like especially in the peer role, like one of the things that happens in other countries and states and, you know, wherever else, they have people who use drugs. So harm reduction is about people who use drugs. And they have people who use drugs part of like the conversation, even to the point where they're doing outreach. And like, no, you can't be high while you're at work. And no, you can't like use drugs or share drugs with like the people that you're servicing. There is this middle ground where like, I've never used drugs. I have no idea like what the best practice is, what people need, what you don't need. And like, I've learned a lot, you know, but like at the end of the day, even if I was in recovery, even if I was using drugs and I had stopped for 6 months or a year, so much of that world and life changes like by the day. So the only people who really know and who are the experts are like people who use drugs.
Yeah.
So we involve them in a lot of that practice. And a lot of the time, other outreach workers will involve people who use drugs in the outreach because they're the ones who know. And it's like where to go, who to talk to, how to talk to them, lingo, all of it. So it's really cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned to me in a previous time that most of us struggle with some form of addiction. Can you expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I guess like most of us use drugs. I think it's like what it comes down to. So like, I mean, I just have water in my cup today, but like I often use coffee. Just caffeine.
Addiction.
Right.
It
could be caffeine or nicotine or like beer, wine, whatever. And I think that there's just this spectrum of like drugs that we use, and some are normalized and some are not. And I think like that, like quote unquote, like, problematic relationship is different for everybody. So like, I wouldn't really deem that I have a problematic relationship with coffee. If I was having 6 cups a day and I got like that nasty headache that some people get when they don't have their coffee, that might be something to talk about. You know what I mean? And, like, I'm not saying it's an addiction, but like the shoe fits.
I am.
Yeah.
You're addicted to coffee.
Right. Yeah. So I think when we talk about drugs, there's just this like line that we've drawn in the sand to say that like the hard drugs are bad for you and that bad people use them.
Right.
And like,
I mean, you hear quotes, the war on drugs, like that was huge.
Yeah. Nixon, like the 70s. And he was like, you know, let's have this big war to like on the drugs, right? But like drugs are an inanimate object. You can't wage war on inanimate objects. You wage war on people. Yeah. So even though he waged the war on the drugs, it's the people who have experienced like any of the violence or suffering that has come from it. And now you got me on this tangent about the war on drugs, but like,
it's good.
There's studies that have come out where like over like several years, I think like the one in my brain, there's a chart in my brain right now. You can't really see it, but
I'll look it up and I'll put it on here. No, trust me. Okay.
But it's from the 70s to 2010. And it was comparing how much we spent to the addiction rate. And we know the addiction rate because like, you know, we have all these outreach workers, we have like all these different guidelines that say specifically what addiction is. And the expenditure is like crazy. It's like $1.5 trillion from the 70s to 2010.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the addiction rate is at the bottom and it's just flat. And it's like nothing really happened. Yeah. And around that same time, we're just seeing this increase in overdoses around the same thing. So like the war on drugs was like a complete fail. And I'm not saying that the people who participated all were bad people.
Good intentions do not always cause good outcomes.
Right.
That's,
So I think now though, like a lot of years have passed and we're still doing the same. The only change that we're really seeing is like more suffering. Yeah. And things like harm reduction that are evidence-based actually work for like several different reasons. Like, you know, we have like this idea of like connection and support for people who use drugs. Because we recognize that like not everybody has like this like incessant brain disease that we always talk about. It's a spectrum. Yeah. So my last job, I was responding to overdoses. Like that was the one that I applied for and that I got. And I remember going to houses and having this idea that I would like be talking to like a bunch of homeless dudes. You know, like the media tells us that people who use drugs are homeless and dirty and they look a certain type of way. Yeah. And I'm going to these houses that are like literally millions of dollars houses, people with like suit and tie are opening the door and they're like, oh yeah, I'm the one that overdosed.
Yeah. Like say what?
Yeah. So it was one of those.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think that when we talk about like people who use drugs, it's a really broad statement. It's a really broad like reflection of like what's actually happening. And we think about this one little like this 2% worth of the population because those are the ones that are visible. but people who use drugs are everywhere. You know, we have like people who use drugs for pain, or maybe there's like someone who has a substance use disorder who uses drugs because it buys them from the street, even because they don't have access, their doctor hasn't prescribed them, or it's normalized in their community. Which I always think of like the quote unquote like soccer mom who like, you know, they're using medication to solve one of their, whether it's pain, physical or mental or whatever. But I think that like at the end of the day, the substance use isn't always necessarily the problem. When it comes to overdoses and like why we lose people, like the two biggest ones is one, like the drug supply, right? There's no FDA regulation on dope on the street. Yeah. So it changes like constantly. It's constantly changing, you know, and someone can buy from their dealer and it'll be like a tiny corner of the bag has like fentanyl or dope or heroin in it. Yeah. Not a lot amount at all. And the rest of it is adulterants. And then the next bag they buy has half of that, half fentanyl or dope or whatever you want to call it. And they have no idea because there's no regulation around it. Yeah. And that's one reason, a big reason why people experience overdoses and die. The other part of it is because they use drugs alone. If you were to experience an overdose in a public environment, someone's probably going to call 911 or render aid. If you're, you know, with a bunch of friends who also use drugs and you experience an overdose, same thing. But like, again, substance use, using drugs, it's so stigmatized, especially around opiates. When we talk about it and shame it, it doesn't stop the behavior because it's the one thing that often works for them. It just pushes it underground. So
right, shame makes you want to hide.
Yeah. Yeah. So they use behind closed doors instead. And then when they have an overdose, no one's there to save them. And that's what we see more often than not is they're dying because they're alone. Yeah.
Which again goes back to when you use terms like war. We need to be a war on your mental like need for a dependency on a drug that helps you. Right. It doesn't make people, just using words like that and just in a conversation, let's say we're at a pool party and our neighbor is using drugs and we don't know that. And we're like, they're all degenerates. They're all bad people. Yeah. They're all thugs. They're all homeless people. Right. That person's using drugs is like, I can't trust my friends to let them know that I'm struggling with this because that's what they think of me. Right. And I think they say, I don't remember what the saying is. I'll put it up here if I get it wrong. But basically it's like shame dies in the light. So it's like shame is going to die if you share. Right. And we can't have that. We can't have a war on drugs unless we kind of have like a war on brokenness. Like that's what it kind of boils down to in my mind.
Yeah. Even like it comes down to we arrest people who use drugs, right? We arrest them for like possession. And it's like, who do you arrest? You arrest criminals. And criminals look and act a certain type of way. We talk about this a lot in like the public health world, but like in every facet of our society, we shame drug use. So if you go and you watch a movie and it's like the homeless dude who's using drugs in the street corner. Yeah. I just saw a commercial a couple of days ago that was like, stop using fentanyl. And it was this dude who was like super normal. He looks in the mirror. He turns like this pale blue and then his face is all covered in pockmarks and scars from using drugs. And that's saying that every person who uses drugs looks like that dude in the mirror. Right. And then our laws, you know, like people use drugs for a variety of reasons. People might use drugs because they're partying, because they have pain, physical or mental, because they're coping with trauma. I don't know. Like, why do you drink a beer? Right. You know, it's kind of it's the same thing, you know? Yep. And I think that instead of having the open conversation, and this is the same thing for prevention coalitions too, they've started to really talk about it, is like instead of saying, you know, the DARE motto of like, don't use drugs. The question really is, why are you using drugs? And then like, how do we keep our children and our people safe? And it's by keeping the door open for the conversation. Like if you push hard towards treatment, if you push hard to not use drugs, you push people away. That's the only thing that comes out of it. Yeah. And then when they do those things, they're going to do them alone or not call you. You know, like I always think of like the kid who, you know, their parents are like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And then they drink for the first time and they drive home because they don't want to tell their parents. Right. Like, it'd be so much safer if you just called mom. You know? Yeah, and let her know what the hell's going on, right? Or even like when I first started this job, I would respond like 24 to 48 hours after an overdose. So like police show up, give him Narcan, then they bring me the next day. And I remember going to this kid's house. He was like 24 years old, and he was buying, I think like Xanax or, you know, something that was like not prescribed to him from the street for, I think it was stress or pain or, you know, whatever it was. And he was a college student. Yeah. And he had overdosed because he didn't know what was in the supply. And I remember having this conversation with him, not just about treatment, which is always an option, but also about like what he can do if he's going to continue that behavior, which is really like use fentanyl test strips, test your supply. They're, you know, very affordable. I had them with me. I was like, here's some test strips. And he was like, I don't need that. And I was like, are you gonna like keep using it. And he was like, I don't really know, like that freaked me out, but like I don't need any of that stuff. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
And I think like 3 weeks later he died from an overdose.
Right.
And I think that like, again, we shame and we talk about like, I'm not one of those people when like you're just a people. Like you're just a regular. It's kind of
like in some instance, either shame has to die or you do. And like that's so morbid, but it is the truth. And this is what is happening on the daily.
Right.
Because and a lot of people, again, reason why you die of overdose usually is because you're alone. Mm-hmm. You don't have anyone there to know what's going on. So I haven't put this in the question, but this I think is great to expand on. Could you tell us why fentanyl is becoming more of an issue in drugs in general? Do you know? And if you don't know, that's fine. But I thought it would be a good one.
Doing the harm reduction stuff, one of the fastest stuff is drug checking. So it's not drug testing. It's not like we're taking like your analysis stuff. It's like you give me drugs and I test them or I check them with this like fancy machine that we have. And I can basically take a small sample, like grain of rice size, and look at it through this machine, and it'll tell me what is in that small, like microscopic piece of drugs. And from doing that, and even beforehand, we really found that like there's not a lot of heroin around anymore. I think that's like a misconception. So like
it is. I thought that was kind of what was happening in Torrington.
Yeah. So like we also pull public health, right? We pull data from like all these different sources. So we have like the drug checking stuff, and while that's for the individuals who use drugs, it's also for like data for us. And then we also have like OCME. So when someone passes away, toxicology report, they send that out to us and they'll say like, this is what was in their bodies when they died.
Right.
2024, 986 people died and 42 of them had heroin in their bodies. And those are overdoses. So 900 something people died from an overdose. 42 of them had fentanyl. Most of them had more than one substance in their bodies because again of like this adulterated supply of drugs that we have. And a lot of them had fentanyl. So I love that you asked this question because this is stuff that we talk about all the time, but there's this idea called the iron law of prohibition. So I always talk about Great Gatsby, right? I'm sure you've read the book, like 1920s, they made alcohol legal. What happened?
The prohibition, you said?
Yeah, so prohibition, alcohol's illegal.
They're drinking a lot.
Yeah, they're drinking a lot.
They're partying. Right.
Partying, right. So again, like we made this thing illegal, and rather than regulating it in some way, we just said kibosh and said no mas, and it drove the behavior underground.
Yeah. And start going to your bathtub and making some juice in there, whatever it is.
And to bring it over state lines now, you're not going to bring like 100,000 30 racks over. You're going to bring drugs moonshine, and unregulated moonshine. And that's what really happens. Like before then, it was really like beer and wine. It wasn't like this crazy like hard liquor thing.
Right. There's always outliers too that are like way going over, and people are like, that is a problem. Right. But that doesn't mean it's your average Joe using.
Yeah. But then so that happens, and they start in order to get over state lines, you have to make it stronger and smaller so you can hide it.
Right.
We see that every single time it happens. So we've criminalized heroin. Before heroin, it was opium. So it was just a plant. Criminalized the plant, criminalized heroin, and then...
I'm picturing plants in like little...
little handcuffs? Yeah. Please add that.
To okay, I will. I'll figure it out. Yeah.
That's like the cover of this conversation. But it's opium, and when they criminalize it, we kind of move to heroin, right? And it gets smaller and stronger. And then from heroin, we criminalize that, smaller and stronger to fentanyl. And then we're seeing it again now where it's going smaller and stronger because we're criminalizing it over to like carfentanil and nitazines and all these other things that are opiates. And I think as that's happening, the supply is just churning out all this other stuff, other drugs, to try and make room and make way for like when it's criminalized.
Yeah.
So we have all these different adulterants coming into the supply when instead we should probably be talking about how to make it safe for people because drug use is going nowhere. It's been in society and culture for like a bajillion years, right? Like we're never going to delete addiction or substance use disorders or drug use. So how do you keep it safe?
Yeah.
Like I go to the bar if I want to have a couple drinks, or I can have a drink at home and be safe about it.
Yeah.
People who use drugs, for some reason, we've just made this line that says all of them do this one thing and it makes them inherently bad. It's not as black and white as that.
What's the thing like where all the cops would come and teach all the kids?
Dare.
Yeah. Oh my God. Maybe we could talk about that in a Patreon episode. Okay. We'll do that after. Okay. Yeah. So let's continue on. So we talked about practices. You mentioned everybody has some sort of type of addiction. Okay. So what is a stigma? And how does it affect your work and the people that you work with?
I mean, I feel like stigma kills people. There's self-stigma. if I'm a person who uses drugs and I'm seeing all these different facets of like law, of, like on the media, on every movie that I watch, people on the street are talking about what a drug user looks like, I'm going to start to believe that stuff. And that's
you start to form like a picture in your head.
Yeah, of the shoes that you should fit into. And I think like that kind of quote of like people fill the shoes that you give them to wear, it's really true. So when we consistently draw the same image that every drug user looks like this, they start to believe it. And public health, we talk a lot about like stigma and how we have to like normalize drug use and normalize Narcan and normalize all of these things. But I think we sometimes miss this conversation about the individual and how they see themselves. And that's a big part of it too, because even if we have all of this stuff in place, all of these access points to treatment and recovery and Narcan and harm reduction responses, strategies, and all that fun stuff, if they feel like they don't deserve it, they're never going to accept it. And I think that's what we often come up against too. One of the things we do is we have like outreach locations every week, 1 to 2 hours, sometimes a little bit longer. We're at like a designated spot. In public health, we use data to inform like where we go. So we have this thing called OD map. We pull it up and it'll tell us where all the overdose hotspots are in like whatever area we're looking at. And then we can say, okay, well, this is like a big cluster of overdoses for the year. So let's go there and hang out on the sidewalk or go to that business that's nearby and see if they carry Narcan and like stuff like that. And we talk to people, and we even have spots where like people who use drugs will show up the same times that we do, and they get harm reduction supplies and Narcan, but like above all else, they're really good in connection. The amount of times that we give them just a jacket or it's cold out and we bring hot cocoa, or like the amount of hugs that I've given out to just random strangers who like they come up and it's so clear they just need a hug. It's ridiculous. And I think if we just had these conversations more often of like, I see you for you as human before I see you, even if you do use drugs. And I'm not saying that like, every person out there is perfect and we should like do X, Y, and Z and like never criminalize anything, right? I think we like hear that message of like love everybody and all of a sudden it's kumbaya, like no more arresting. I'm not saying that. There's laws in place for a reason. We have to follow the laws. Some of them are just a little dumb. And I think that's
that's what I've been saying.
So
yes.
I think especially possession or something like that, right? It's not a police conversation. It's behavioral health. And that's where we're at right now, is we're like still living in this criminality, in this world of like criminal justice, responding to this thing, and it just doesn't fit. It's a different shape. And now we have
I say too, there's so many people online that don't have any cops in their family, right? And have only seen like harm that cops can do in a society where it is a human issue. It's not like hey, they're a criminal that just like beat someone up and they need to get off the street. Like they are using and they need help. And I think it's really a bipartisan thing. We can all agree that cops don't want to have to deal with that much emotional distraughtness when they're not equipped for it. You are. And they shouldn't have to do all of these jobs in one thing because it's very stressful. Also, cops are not allowed to use drugs at all to relax, which is kind of what drugs do. So then you have a lot of drinking issues that comes with cops. And this is like a blanket statement, right? There's statistics on it. I'll put it up there. If it's not you, it's not applying to you. Don't take it personally. But everyone wants to see the world improve. And if cops are saying this and seeing it in their families and saying something should be done, and I'm trying the best I can, but there's only so much time and our resources and what people will support us with and the rules within the bounds that we have to work, then there should be harm reduction in other places.
Well,
so
it's funny because like my people don't want to see the cops. The cops don't want to see them.
Right.
I don't want the cops to show up at their house when it comes to criminality stuff, right? So it's like, we're here, let us do the job. So I think that's where like that overdose response thing is awesome, because it puts them into our hands. And there's so much data out there now in the last probably like 7 or 8 years that has come out to say that like these initiatives work amazing. Call volume is down oftentimes when it comes to like this specific like overdose trends and people who use drugs. It really changes things, which is super cool to see. But I feel like with stigma, it's so interesting that like we don't talk about it in any way. Like police have the same thing where like mental health, right? Like there's a lot of stuff they deal with and it's a hard job. And I couldn't do it. Like I think that's a big part of why I'm not a cop, is like I couldn't, there's no way that I could deal with all of those things, going from like an overdose to like a cat in a tree and then back to some other thing where I have to like arrest somebody. Like, I don't have that in me to like do that big range of emotions and then come home and act like nothing happened. That's a hard job, and I think
you'll figure it out. We'll say it later. My bad. I derailed us for a second. Okay, we'll clap again. 1, 2, 3. I love when people clap with me. It's so nice.
I missed it a little bit though.
That's okay. All right, so we talked about stigma and how it affects your work. Now let's talk about how can we reduce stigmas around drug addicts and the homeless community, or people in general.
what helped me, right? Because when I started this job, I was not a harm reductionist. Like harm reduction to a lot of people might look like and feel like enabling until you like really understand the concept.
Right.
And it felt like that for me because I had just come from like let's arrest them to like now I'm like we're not doing that. And like just we're giving them like supplies to use in a safe way. Like it's a big shift. And what really helped me was like being out there and seeing it work. I don't know how to like show that to people.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do with my job now is like I have direct access to people who use drugs. And they will always be this faceless group of people that we advocate for because, again, like using drugs is illegal and highly stigmatized. So what I often do is and all of us do this. Like I coordinate like the efforts around it, but like there's a lot of outreach workers in this area. And working with people who use drugs, we'll collect quotes from them, and it could be anything from like "today sucks" to "thank you so much." One of the ones that comes to mind is like it's just in my head now, and I'm pretty sure it was something along the lines of like "thank you so much for these supplies. I'd be dead if I didn't have them." And another one I remember like I was at an outreach site the week before. One of the guys who I would see every single week died after like 3 years of me seeing him every Friday for like 3 years. And I went there and like myself am grieving, right? Like, it's not like I was living with the dude, and it's not like I like knew him like the rest of the people there who lived with him every day, but like I cared for him.
It affects you.
Yeah. And I went there really to check in on them. And one of the first things they said was something along the lines of like, that's the toughest part about this life out here. You just never know who you're going to wake up without next. And like, I feel like those types of conversations and like those direct quotes from people who are living that life are so impactful because like, again, like I'm just a dorky social worker, public health guy, right? You can listen to me gab all day. Most people probably won't. But when you have people who have the real experience or people who are in recovery who can speak directly to what their life was like and how it changed after harm reduction and all of that fun stuff happened, I think that's how we make real change. And it takes courage to get up and talk about it. And like my role, and I don't know if you're in recovery or not, but if you're not in recovery, your role too is to be like the ally space, is to like raise those voices up to be like, this is their experience. I don't have that to talk about. I know what their experience was. I hear about it all the time. I can sort of talk about it, but it'll never be the same as someone who has lived it or is living it saying, this is what my life is like.
Right. Still too, though, your experience is different than what mine is because I am not going out and doing this harm reduction, right? So can I ask, before you went out in the field and actually met these people one-on-one, face-to-face, and like saw them as a full human being with their own lives just as rich as whatever we've lived, what changed in your mind from before you did that to like after meeting these people? Was there like a certain subject or something that you were like, that is not how I expected it to go or what I was expecting to see?
Yeah, I thought my job for like probably longer than I cared to admit was about recovery, and in the concept that like recovery is healing, I guess it is. But like my like harm reduction's objective is not necessarily recovery. It's quality of life. Just because you use drugs doesn't mean that you deserve to have a shitty life. Like I have these I have these people who like, now we have access to these services, but harm reduction I think on paper started like around like the HIV and AIDS epidemic, and it was in response to like people who were using drugs were injecting drugs and sharing syringes or reusing them.
Yeah.
And from that, right, we had like this spread of disease in a few different categories. And I'm just talking about drugs right now.
Yeah.
And harm reduction does span outwards, like away from drugs too, but like we'll stick to this for now.
Yeah.
But like I think
that's another episode.
Yeah, that's another episode. Yeah. But like in that context, the first person that did harm reduction was like, I think they called him Bleach Man or something along those lines. It's a dude who like put a jug of bleach on his head and he taught people as like a superhero how to clean your syringes out so that if you are going to share them, it's a little bit safer. And that's harm reduction. Like, right, like drug use is inherently dangerous.
Yeah.
But there are safer ways to use drugs that keep harm away. So I always think about like sunscreen, right? Like you can probably tell on the screen, I'm a pretty pale dude. If I use sunscreen every 2 hours, I'm still going to burn. 50 SPF, it does not matter, I'm going to burn. I'll burn less if I have sunscreen on.
Yeah.
That's harm reduction.
Yeah,
so
right.
Seatbelts, cigarette filters, all those things, like there's still incessant harm that could happen to you, but it's safer.
Right.
And I think that's what harm reduction really is.
I mean, Kyle, you tell me, if you're addicted to something and then someone just takes it all away from you, how does that affect one?
Yeah. So,
yeah. How does that affect a human?
So we have this idea that like, it's a willpower thing, or you can just go cold turkey and will yourself out of it. I think the hard part is I don't like blanket statements.
Yeah.
Because there are people who can do that. I know lots of people who are like, you know what, I'm just going to stop and that's that. They like.
I mean, to me, that's kind of a personality trait, though. Not everybody's like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think like substance use disorders, drug use is like, it's this spectrum. Humans love black and white.
Yeah.
That's just not life at all.
Yeah.
Life is full of nuance. So like, I know people who are like, I'm done, I'm going to stop using, and that's that. And they do, and they're successful in it. And I know a lot of people who are expected to do that, arrested when they don't succeed, and then when they come home, they go back to using drugs, even if it's 10 years later, because their circumstances didn't change. When we talk about like substance use disorders, you know, like a clinical term that is looking at the individual and saying like they're being diagnosed with a substance use disorder, not a problematic relationship to drugs, not like, you know, whatever else, not using drugs, but a disorder. Those people need a completely different level of care. And it's often medication. That's the most successful, like methadone and Suboxone or Vivitrol, like whatever it is. There's this space where like if you have a heart disease, right, you're not going to will it away. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Damn. You know, so like, yeah, there's things you can do to be safer. Like maybe you like eat better, you exercise, all those things. But like the thing that's really going to help and not cure it, but help is medication. And that's what keeps people alive and keeps them or allows them to live like some sort of healthy life.
Right.
But even ideas around that are stigmatized.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at you, whoever's watching this. Imagine something that like you really struggled with, and then you take it away the next day, or excuse me, let me be more specific. Emotionally, imagine emotional trauma that's happened to you. Probably has. And then someone told you, you have to fix that all. You never have to feel bad about it ever again tomorrow. Like it's done tomorrow. Not many people can do that.
No.
Certainly not me. So who am I to judge someone else?
A friend of mine explained addiction to me, again, like not in recovery, I don't know, as like, imagine you're driving down the road and it's one of those like really terrible rainstorms and your car is shaking. You're white knuckling it, you can see like 3 feet in front of you and it's just kind of like the line that you're watching. You can't even see cars in front of you. Very stressful. And you finally go under that tunnel and it's just like peaceful silence. There's no rain, you can see again. It's all just gone for like half a second, you know?
You take a breath, you can breathe, and
that's drug use. That quiet moment is the thing that like makes it all go away for just a moment. And it's like, how could you not? You know, like if that's the option, even though you know it's not good for you, and even if you know that it's like making all of these things in your life decline, and it's not like that for everybody, but for the ones that I think are more visible to society, that's what we see. How do we expect them?
It's a constant in your life that you can trust.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you expect them to not use that without offering other coping mechanisms?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. Okay, let's see here now. Can we reduce stigmas? Or, well, how can we? We already talked about that. Hey, I'm moving down to the bottom. Okay, what's your take on substance use disorders as a spectrum? Well, we talked about that.
Yeah, sorry,
moving on. No, it's okay. No, you're getting ahead of the game. I like this. You call yourself a middleman in your job. Why is that?
I don't remember calling myself a middleman.
I think you were saying like in the middle of like people that are in harm reduction themselves that you're helping, and then also people that are working beside you and have different life experience than you do.
Yeah, I feel like, especially with like, you know, a lot of people in harm reduction don't like cops. And I think, especially as a society, again, it's black and white, right? It's like, we have this idea that like, okay, all drug users, they commit crimes and they steal and they do all these terrible things. And then we, again, the other side of the spectrum, all the cops are, they shoot people and they hate people and they do all these terrible things and they just want to hurt. And neither of them are true.
Yeah.
You know, so I find myself with this kind of like lucky middle ground because I get to see both sides and I see where like the harms from society like really are.
Yeah.
And I think if we could have more open conversations, like doing the work that I did with like the overdose response, there's so many people out there, like so many police officers out there that got into the job, most of them, because they just want to help. And they've been told that arresting people helps.
Yeah.
And I know there's more to that conversation.
Of course,
just talking about harm reduction here, but
it's
I think
another few episodes.
Yeah. But I think that's what we're really looking at is like we both sides have this idea of what the other one looks like and does, and it's just not true. So I think that space where I get to have conversations with people who use drugs who have an inherent distrust of police officers, and I was probably introduced to them by a police officer who not only responded to their overdose and saved their life, but then showed up the next day and said, "Hey, do you have Narcan? Here's Kyle. I give a shit." And like I always talk about like community policing, like you have like coffee with a cop and like all those things. Like who shows up to coffee with a cop? People who like cops.
Yeah.
So like my people who don't like cops, they're not showing up.
Right. Yeah.
They're not trying to meet new police officer friends.
Well, there's fear around it.
There's fear. Yeah. So I think when we can change that script and be like, on the police side, I give a shit. Do you have Narcan? Here's someone who can actually help you, even if it's with harm reduction. And then with like the people who use drug side to be like, hey, here's the positive story of someone who's still using drugs. You haven't been called to that house in months, even though you used to go there 3 times a week or 4 times a week. that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Like, here's like both sides coming together and talking about it. And like, it's not a perfect story every time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to draw this image of like, you know, everything's beautiful and rainbows and unicorns, but
at the same time too, it is so easy to see, especially when you're online, that a story of something kind of terrible and awful gets a lot of traction, and then stories that are actually like pretty positive and good, those just don't get the eyeballs because it's not as salacious or whatever you want to say.
I think we have like human nature has this drive to look at the bad things. You know, it's like why you can't look away from like a train car accident or, you know, like whatever that like
metaphor
is. It's true. And like we are surrounded by algorithms now that track how long you look at this one thing. And if you look at those bad things, which you are, as human nature is inherently going to make you do, you're going to see more of it.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to look at more positive stuff on your Facebook feed or wherever you go to social media, you'd probably see more positive things.
Yeah. I got to balance it out, man. Yeah, I got to balance it out.
Because you'll be happy and you'll laugh for 5 minutes. But when you're mad about something, you're swiping and going down that rabbit hole, right? Like it's just human nature. Yeah, you're in the comments for 15 minutes, and you're getting all riled up, and that's just what we do.
Yeah.
And they track that.
Well, two, going back to what you're doing is you are giving, not kindling to a fire of someone being so upset, but you are giving a solution to that anger. Like instead of just being angry and getting frustrated with a system, you're finding a new system and you're like, well, let's just figure it out then.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which is what we need.
Right.
We need more Kyles in the world.
Hey, thanks.
Get them. Yeah. Send them in. Yeah.
I think too, like, I feel like harm reduction especially is like the tagline of harm reduction is meeting people where they're at. And like my job is not always to fix everything. Like I'd love to fix like a lot of the policy stuff. Like I'm down to fix some of that. There's a lot of stuff we got to work on. Right. But like I think when it comes down to like some of these spaces where people are just like really experiencing hurt and pain, and they're scared and they're tired and they're hungry, or you know whatever it is, there's nothing you can do to solve that besides just show up and be a person for them. And I think we, as a society, just expect to like fix it, and I would love to do that, but right now those people are living like that, and whether they're housed or unhoused or whatever, it doesn't really matter. There's like just a lot of hurt people out there. And sometimes you just gotta sit with them. You know, it's not always about fixing it.
Yeah, and here we are sitting right here.
Yeah.
Do as we do. Yeah. Okay, so we got through the middleman. So one of my last questions, it's like 3 more. Okay. Some people believe that arresting drug users is necessary at this point in time because it's just prevalent. So what do you think is the actual solution?
It's a hard question. I know a lot of people who have been arrested, and that's where they found the recovery. They like went to jail, they went to prison, whatever it was. They came out to their PO, probation officer, and they now have a successful version of abstinence-based recovery. And that's what has worked for them. I don't think we can say these like blanket statements of like, do this all the way or do this all the way. I'm never going to say like harm reduction is the only thing that we can do, but harm reduction is also a philosophy. So we have like harm reduction supplies we give out, and we have these conversations, and it's all through this like evidence-based harm reduction lens. But the philosophy of harm reduction is really about like autonomy and really looking at like being person-centered. So I'm a big believer in like clean slate for every person that you talk to, because like I'm not really a tough love guy. I don't know if you can pick that up for me.
Yeah, me neither.
But like some people might need just a really forward, direct conversation. And like, it's not about me, it's about them. So like, I would do my best to offer that to them. And I think that's the space we have to take up, is like these nuanced things, to have conversations with people in the ways that they need to have them and to have options. I do think that like when someone breaks a law, right, like there should be some sort of penance or punishment. But when it comes to specifically drug use, if you're arrested for like having drugs or using drugs, that's a different conversation because it's behavioral health. It doesn't belong in criminal justice. If you steal, even if it's for drugs, right, you just broke a law, right? And like that's a different conversation. And like the work that I'm doing, like I would hope that they often talk about doing is like connecting them back to resources like me or my team, rather than arrest. And that's not 35 times, right? But like there is a space where like, okay, you stole. I identified you as a new person who has maybe a substance use disorder, has a lot of high need stuff, or you're at risk for one reason or another. Here's a resource for you, and I'm maybe not going to arrest you this time. If it happens 6 more times, right, like different conversation. You've still broken some laws.
Yeah.
So I think we just have to do stuff that makes sense. In public health, we have these conversations where like there's a space where beliefs inform policy. We've decided that drugs are inherently bad and the people who use them are inherently bad. So we've criminalized drugs. And it's just like not the case at all. Sometimes either drugs make people do things, or like people who use drugs do things that are not rational, not safe, not smart, whatever you want to call it. And they should be held liable for crime, for causing harm. But when it comes to specifically drugs, it's a different conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we get mixed up, is we look at all the same.
It sounds like you live in a gray area, and a lot of people are not, again, comfortable talking about a gray area.
No.
Especially, by the way, when you're on TV as like a newscaster, they're like, hey, come up with a story and fix it in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, say what? Like, so it's people like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And right now it seems like we're almost like kind of past the first section, and we're now trying to see what the middle is going to be. So, and maybe, the world is literally just getting started in a way. So,
and like we talk harm reduction, we talk a lot about so one cool thing about harm reduction that I think we use as a selling point, but that is not the objective, is that people who access an SSP, which is a syringe service program, are 5 times more likely to get into treatment than somebody who's not.
Really? Wow.
So while that's super cool, and they get access to treatment, not necessarily the objective, because again, it's about quality of life. And I think one of the things that's helped me a lot is I'm surrounded by people all the time who are super way smarter than me, and I hear a lot of smart stuff from them. And I remember one time we were having this conversation about somebody who had passed away, and this woman was saying, who works in this field, that even when we talk about people who maybe they're going to use for the rest of their lives, and they're in that chaotic use, and they're really struggling, and they're having a terrible time in their lives, if we can be present for them and offer connection and support to them and increase their quality of life and increase their stability, even if they keep using drugs and they die from it, and maybe they experience an overdose or whatever it is, they died knowing that someone loved them and that they were connected to somebody. And I feel that's the cool,
Yes.
How neat is that? What really matters here? Is it about recovery and abstinence, or is it about quality of life?
Yeah.
And I think that's the goal.
Yeah. Which, by the way, we are not saying that they died happy. No, that's not what we're saying. But to know that you at least tried to make an impact, and maybe that helped keep someone around for a couple more days is something. It is something.
They died knowing someone gave a shit. And I feel we all need that, And that was I'm not in recovery. I was very nervous when I started this, because I just don't get it. I've never used drugs, and I know that I don't get it, and I will never get it. People who don't have an addiction or substance use disorder will never know what it's like. So I was do I fit in here? Do I know, should I be staying here? I didn't know. And my boss, I tell this story kind of frequently, but she just asked me if I gave a shit. I was oh yeah. So yeah, I do. Yeah, I sure do. And she was all right. And I think that's the work. You just give a shit, And I think we show up in different ways, and maybe it's not palatable for everybody, but there's a lot of times when you just show up to one of those locations of outreach or whatever it is, and you're just cracking jokes and talking to people, and you just give a shit. And they don't, there's so many people now who they're in treatment or they're in recovery, whatever that is, how they define that. It might not be abstinence, but it might be some sort of healing in some way. And they just show up to the sites now just to say hi to us. Yeah. Because they know we give a shit.
Right.
And that's just
oh my God, you want a community too? Who knew?
Yeah,
right?
Crazy.
Yeah. And it goes both ways. It's mutually beneficial to have other people in your life.
Oh yeah.
It just is. Yeah.
Did we talk about Rat Park yet?
No.
No.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so big science guy in Germany. He goes, I'm going to prove that if you use drugs one time, you're screwed for life, and that's that. You're addicted forever. And he put all these rats in individual cages, and they had a bottle of water and a bottle mixed with water and morphine. And in that experiment, he was right. All of them went to the water and the morphine over and over again, incessantly. They all died. And then he was yeehaw, whatever. I proved it. I don't think he said yeehaw in Germany, but whatever it was.
I'm sure he did. Yeah, anyways, I believe you.
Yeah. But then someone else was it's not really the human experience, right? We have community. We have other people with us. We have fun and toys and food and all those things. So they made this big rat cage with a bunch of rats in it. Ratopia.
Yeah.
And it had and they talked about this in a couple of studies, but they had other rats and food. They had sex with the rats. They had they hung out and played, and they did all these things that humans do, right? And they had community. And there was still the water, and the water mixed with morphine, and none of them died. And I'm not saying that community is going to solve kumbaya all of our problems, but I am saying that connection has so much more to do with it, because when you isolate people, like we do with all of these laws and stigma and all those things, it's really hard to feel you should give a shit about yourself. And that's the one thing that makes you feel good is drugs. Why would you not use it? But community and exercise and all those positive things do the same thing on a physiological level.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we have to offer more. And in this work of recovery or outreach or whatever you want to call it, that peer work, we get to go out, and even if you're you know what, I'm going to keep using drugs. We're sick. Do you want to go for a walk? Whatever it is, that's fine. Yeah, right. And I think that's what we offer to people is we can see you as you are, see your humanity, give a shit about you, and recognize that your drug use is this really small fractional aspect of your life compared to everything else that you are that makes you human.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, pretty
I like
neat.
this.
Yeah,
I think it is pretty neat.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't mean we have all the solutions, but it's a step, and it's a good one. It's a really good one.
And the rest of the people sharing it, though.
Yeah, no, that's
let's just try something different.
Yeah.
You know?
There's this comedian I love, and she talks about how like her and her husband will say some things are good and some things are bad by going, you know, and it's like my husband and I do that sometimes. I'm like, no, so that's a big, you know.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, harm reduction is,
it's pretty neat. Yeah, it works. You know?
Right.
Yeah, it's a tool in the toolbox. It's not the one solvent. You know, I don't have the key to the city.
Right, and if we think about that in the broader sense of who needs a harm reduction, right? They don't have any tools in their toolbox. Their tools is the drug.
Yeah.
That is their only tool at this point that they can see. Which again, sometimes you can get tunnel vision and you don't see that there are tools on the side here. But so you're trying to clean those windows, the side things, make the rain less harsh, so that they can figure out what their other tools will be.
Exactly. People call me a tool all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I think you've misread that. Yeah. Oh no. Okay, I'm gonna stop it now.
Also, are you starving? Because I'm starving.
I know you are. I can hear it. Yeah.
I hope they don't hear it after. I'm starving.
That's why we have editing processes. But we'll do that soon. We're getting there. Okay, ready? And this one's going to be a little more personal. So I actually also know you past Northwestern because you hired me to be your photographer for your wedding.
Yeah.
And since then, we are now in your lovely abode.
I don't live here, though.
Yeah. This is just the outdoor office.
Yeah, I don't sleep in here.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, we won't talk about that. So maybe some nights we'll find out. But you now also started your own family. Yeah. So knowing that, what from your work experience has taught you or teaches you about how you show up as a parent now?
I think it comes down to do you give a shit? And I think giving a shit is really hard when it comes to kids. I figured that out recently. It's so difficult sometimes. Yeah, it really is. But I think it doesn't mean that you just give a shit and you just sit there. It means working on yourself and being attentive to what your needs are, the stuff that you pass on to your children and how you pass it on. I think buzzword generational trauma. Right? It doesn't always mean trauma doesn't have to be a physical thing. There's a lot of little t trauma, right? It could be anything. And I think that everyone carries some level of little t trauma at a minimum. And talking about that and working it out so you can see your blind spots is really important when it comes to having kids. And my kid doesn't talk yet. He's got no clue. Yeah. He's just a worm.
He's drooling a little
cries,
bit.
He poops, he just hangs out.
Yeah.
He's been smiling and stuff, which is really cool, but you don't know what's going on, So I'm not necessarily too worried about that right now, but I've started that process to work on it because I think it's really important to not pass on even just my own unhealthy tendencies. We all have them, and I think that it's difficult to do. It's really difficult to do. But remember when I started in this work, harm reduction is it's a really expansive topic. And it's really about responding and supporting people who experience some level of societal structural violence. And I know that sounds like another buzzword, and it doesn't mean physical or even mental violence, but some sort of harm is caused to them by society. And I remember having this conversation about queer people with one of the people that I was working with. And I was having a hard time understanding when I was growing up, it was LGBT. Yeah. And then now it's LGBTQIA+, 2S+. That's a lot of letters. I had a hard time conceptualizing why I had to keep saying more letters. And I think, and this sounds like it's not going to go anywhere about children, but I promise it will. It comes down again to connection and and giving a shit. So the story that was shared with me was that they were very young, growing up. This is a man playing with a doll. And someone in their family said, men don't do that. And then he, as a 6 or 7 year old child, was well, what am I? It wasn't oh, put the doll down. It was oh, shit. What does that mean for me? Because I'm playing with the doll right now. Afterwards, he was lucky enough to have this space where he could have conversations and his parents normalized the behavior, whatever it was. And he had a little bit of a phase where he was a little bit uncertain, where kind of which direction he was going in when it came to his gender. And they supported him. And he, through that, kind of figured out, all right, I'm a dude. This is how I identify, just a straight guy. Cool. And that all happened when he was very young.
You're right.
But I think that the implications of your own fears on your children are ridiculous. It's so crazy how far your kids will interpret things. And I think we all have experienced something. Maybe it's not about gender, but
internalize the fear of others
Something.
onto us, right? Yeah, because I mean, children are very absorbent, so
and perceptive.
Yes, they are.
So I think about that all the time, and like the harm that I could have caused by like, and I'm not even like I'm cool with anybody. You know what I mean? I'm sure you've picked up on that or like whatever, but like I'm down to chat.
Hey, I'm weird and you're cool with me.
I'll chat with a light post. I don't care. And I feel like I just didn't understand, you know? And I think when it comes down to it, like you don't have to. That's something where you can accept without understanding is really important. Just kids are gonna do crazy shit. And you may not understand it, you may not be supportive of it. But I think that when it comes down to it, being like affirmative and caring about them are the like, two pieces that really matter for them to grow up a quality human being.
Right. And that's also backed up by statistics. You want to talk about studies on that? A family that cares about their child, about community, those people do not fall through the cracks as often. They feel better, they get support, they are able to find their own home and all these things. That is what I think we all ultimately want. Yeah.
And I think it just comes down to like acceptance. You know what I mean? Like everybody says we love our children, so don't put your shit on them.
Yeah. You know? Amen. Hey, woo. Okay, and that's why we have therapy. If you don't. So they'll have a job for a while, I'm sure. Okay, so we've wrapped this up in a very nice, neat bow, I think. We've talked about harm reduction, we've talked about what you do and what your role is in it, and how you've changed your perception on so many things, which, by the way, thank you for being vulnerable in this way, because I think a lot of people are unwilling to say, hey, I had the wrong idea and I really believed in it. And a lot of people also are like, I won't change, because that requires something of me internally. And that's just not what we're doing on this channel. So I love to see this instead. And again, especially coming from a man, it's like, it's okay to change. It's okay to question things. And it's okay to have an intimate moment with someone that you barely even know. Like that actually that's punk as fuck. Like that is not soft in any way. That is like doing hard work.
Totally
is showing up. So
sure.
So I appreciate that in you.
You're for it. Absolutely.
Okay, Kyle, I ask everybody the same last question as well. What's a song or album you think someone should, or everybody listening should listen to in their lives? Do you have one?
It's in my cell phone and I don't remember what it was.
You want your cell phone here? Here, you take it. Yeah, I have it actually.
Sorry.
Fix your roof. What the hell, man?
No, I like it like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's...
You gotta let it breathe
it's a vibe.
One day I might put wood up there.
That'd be cool.
It's like, this floor wood? It's not good. Sorry.
No, it's okay. That's fine.
Hold on. All right. Okay. So I couldn't think of a song.
Oh, that's fine.
But I have a podcast and like a little reading assignment for people. So I know this is like not what I didn't follow the assignment, but
no, I like it. I like it even better.
So Dr. Vivek Murthy, who is like the Surgeon General in the Biden administration, he wrote this when he left office called My Parting Prescription for America. And it is all about community and why it's so important. And Simon Sinek, I think it's A Touch of Optimism, awesome podcast. He talks with like Dr. Murthy about it, and I like recommend anybody listen to it, because I think that like it really again changed my like perception of like community in general.
That is so cool. I love that. I'm excited. I'm actually going to be having a conversation next week with someone about community, so this is like perfect timing here. I see what you're doing. Okay, very cool.
Team you up.
Okay, well, I just want anybody listening out here too that is maybe struggling with addiction themselves, I want you to know that we see you, we hear you, and you're not alone. You are so not alone. And that's also what shame will do with you, is it will make you feel so isolated, and you're not. We might be here by ourselves, but we're here for you too. So just take that with you. Yeah, peace out. Okay, cool. Kyle, nice work.
I had another thing that I was going to say, and it was really smart, and I don't remember what it was.
It'll come back to you. Yeah, I will.